otherwise it's just going to look like Ghost. That stops. The easiest way to start working on your mobility deficits is to first find out what they actually are. So today we're going to go through a self-mobility assessment with Mabel.
Hello, let's get started.
So the easiest way to assess yourself is to actually record everything. And for the neck, we will get you to stand face onto the camera, standing up nice and tall with your arms by your side, head turning all the way to the left, and then turning all the way to the right. And in this, we're looking for the nose and the chin line to come to the middle part of the clavicle. So for assessing your shoulder mobility, we want you to have the camera in the same plane, except you want to be facing away. You're going to have arms down by the side, left hand is going to come up and over the head, brushing the hair, trying to reach down the spine as far as we can go, and then bring that hand out, and you'll repeat on the opposite side, trying to see if you can get slightly further down. You're perfect. Bring the arm out. You'll repeat the process, but bringing the left hand in behind the back as far as you can, reaching up to touch as high as you can, using that as a reference point. Let that left arm come out, and then right hand coming in behind the back as well. And as we can see, right hand doesn't quite make it as far. So we have a deficit on right shoulder internal rotation. So the next movement we're going to look at is a toe touch. You want to set the camera up so it's side onto you, facing perpendicular to the camera. So turn to face me. Feet would come together, and then bending forwards to touch the toes. Now what we want to look for here is firstly what's called a nice uniform curve throughout the spine, looking for any parts that have more flatness than the other. So is the lower back straight and the upper back doing all of the bending, or vice versa? We also want to make sure that both knees are nice and straight so that the hamstrings aren't limiting this forward bend. All right, take a seat. So we're going to be looking at thoracic rotation, and it's a two-parter. Firstly, you'll need to squeeze something in between your knees, and then hands are going to go across the chest on either shoulder. So firstly, you're going to turn to the left as far as is comfortable, squeezing at the knees, and then turn to the right as far as is comfortable. So it's relatively obvious on this rotation which one has a slightly more of a deficit, but we need to pair it with stick rotation. So you'll take a stick and pop it in behind your head and onto your shoulders. Continue squeezing at the knees, rotating to the left as far as is comfortable, and then rotating to the right as far as is comfortable. And these tests together separate lower thoracic rotation from upper thoracic rotation. So when you're looking at the videos later, it's important to note that where the shoulders sit is really important. Hands across the shoulders again for me. So you'll notice here that when we rotate to the left, so turning to the left as far as you can, you only reach about 30 degrees, whereas when you rotate to the right, you're able to make it more to about 45 or more. So when you're looking at the video, it's looking for those things that's super important.
Okay.
So now we're going to take a look at the wrist. You want to set camera up perpendicular to you, coming into an all fours position. So imagining hands out in front, except you're going to bring one hand nice and central. You're going to lean straight over the top, keeping the elbows straight, taking note of this angle here, and then repeating on the opposite side. So from the camera, you'll be able to see how that angle closes up. If they end up being somewhat even, you then turn towards the camera, bringing forearms together, separating the hands like this, looking to see if you have slightly more of a deficit in that right side, because that's the difference between stretching our long flexors or stretching our short flexors. So now we're going to take a look at the mobility in your hips. Again, you need camera perpendicular to your body, but I want you laying flat on the ground. So laying flat on the ground, legs out straight. If we're doing the left leg, right hand is going to be bracing this hip on that pokey bit at the front. Left foot comes up just above the kneecap, and then you let the knee drop all the way out whilst pushing that hip into the floor, so you're not going to roll over and get a false positive. I'll get you to repeat that on the opposite side for me. Now I know that Mabel's right hip isn't quite as good as her left. Hip stays down, knee doesn't drop down as far. The important part about this is this extension component. So as the knee comes back, it means we have some form of deficit in the front of the hip, so her hip flexors are going to be tighter on this side than the other side. So we're going to be looking at the hip again, but this one's going to be used in conjunction with that first hip test. So you'll be spinning around, camera perpendicular to where you are, taking a seat on your bench, shuffling right towards the edge of the bench, so your feet are only just flat on the floor, and you'll bring left knee up towards the chest, holding it there, and then leaning on back to the bench. So you let yourself lean back, head comes down to the bench, not really intensely pulling the leg back, just so much that you're nice and flat through this area here, because we predominantly want to look at is leg pop. The fact that it's not sitting 90 degrees means that we do have some tension across one specific muscle in the front of the hip. Switching legs for me. And it's not a massive difference, but Mabel does have slightly more intense of a positive on this left-hand side. It means our rectus femoris across the front of the hip is going to be tighter than the other hip flexors. So the next one we're going to look at is ankle. I'll get you to come around the front here, standing just in front of this piece here. So to start off with, you'll set up your foot slightly away from whichever wall you're using, step the left foot back, and then you're gonna drive the knee directly over that middle toe to come into contact with the box, making sure that heel doesn't come up off the floor. So that was a little bit easy. We're gonna shuffle the foot slightly back, repeat the process, just so we hit that maximum range. And at this point, you would make a mark of where the heel is, because you might have one foot that's slightly longer than the other. So once you've made that mark, you'll switch feet, left foot comes up onto that mark, step the right foot back, repeat the process, and measure to see if you have any deficits. This would then be the ankle that you would want to work on. So now we're going to look at your arms overhead, thoracic extension. So heels, butt, back, and head are all in contact with the wall. Camera is again perpendicular to the way that you're facing. You're going to lock your elbows out, thumbs pointing forwards, head in contact with the wall, lifting the arms directly up and over the head, nice and slow. What you want to look for is changes in relationship between the back and the wall. And you'll see as the hands start to come up and over the head, that we start to see the mid-back come away from the wall, which means we're missing some extension through this area. So for Mabel, we found 3 specific areas that we wanted to work on: wrist, mid-back, and the hips. And to start off with, we're going to use one that specifically relates to arm over the head, as well as a loss of rotation. So I'll get you to spin towards the wall here. You want to be sitting relatively close to the edge of a seat, feet in contact with the wall, knees shuffled in so they're in contact with the wall. Hands are going to interlink, placed on top of the wall, and then leaning the forehead into the wall. Now for Mabel, because her extension was lacking lower down in the spine, the hands are slightly above the head. But if it was further up to this middle part here, we would have the hands underneath the forehead. You're going to take a deep breath in, and then as you exhale, imagine that you're trying to push, driving the chest towards the wall. And we're looking for like a gross, stretchy, achy sensation through this area here. Generally, we'd start people off with doing this stretch a minute a day, a couple of times a day. Continue taking breaths, inhale, and then stretching on the exhale, slowly building up to 2 minutes once every day. So I'll get you to spin around this way, because we're going to be stretching the wrist and the fingers itself. So it was your right side was the bad side, particularly with this test here. So what we want to be doing is isolating the muscles that stop in this part of the forearm and not the ones that cross through the forearm. So instead of grabbing all of these fingers, we want you to isolate middle twos, grabbing a hold, locking out the elbow, and then dragging them back. Waiting until we feel either a big pull through this area here, through the hand, or potentially a little bit up through the finger. Again, holding for about 60 seconds, multiple times a day. So 2 or 3 sessions per day, testing over time to see if we get an improvement in that finding. So now we're going to go through a hip stretch that relates directly to the 2 positive findings that we had in your hips. I'll get you to jump up for me. You're going to end up in a lunging position in front of the wall here. So left knee is going to go right into the corner of the wall there. You'll always have a stool next to you for balance. Once you're set in that position here, you assess how nasty it is of a stretch in that position. If it feels okay, you're going to whip that front foot out into a lunge. The idea is that this specifically isolates that one big long hip flexor muscle across the front and pressing up until you feel a stretch. Once you feel the stretch, you're doing the stretch. Don't push past it. 2 minutes, once a day, every day, both sides. You'll get improvements in the hip and potentially in the lower back as well.
Is there any kind of like metric or baseline that I can refer to?
Yeah, of course. There are clinic references that we use, but ideally, I just want you to use your own body. If one side is worse than the other, that's more important than what we've got in the textbooks.
I always remember to do these things for like a week, and I'm motivated for like a week, but then I totally forget. So is there a way that I can like keep track of my progress over time?
Yes, so there's a PDF. It's going to have all of the assessment tools that you'll need. You'll be able to track it over time. There's like little check boxes.
Okay.
For those of you playing along at home, there's going to be a link in the description of the video. So one of the big things that we mentioned with Mabel was the difference between a mobility dysfunction or a neuromuscular connection issue. Frustratingly, you normally need to seek professional advice for this sort of stuff, which is why at Rocktherapy we want to offer you the chance to have 30% off an initial appointment with us by using the We Breathe Adventure code when you make an appointment booking. He can hear everything. So now we're going to take a look at the hip.